Hello guys, so Gemini free Flash is out, and it is far better than I could have ever hoped for, although the price keeps going up. And if you happen to be a paid subscriber to Google, either AI Pro or AI Ultra, I happen to be AI Pro, then you can use it in the Gemini CLI. I was using Gemini CLI, and I have to say, it is the best way to use their Gemini Free Pro. But let's just see how good it is. And we can see that price-wise, it's $50 in. And if you looked at your stats, then you realize that if you're just coding, I'm talking about coding use case here, then the input price matters the most. At least my experience is that I tend to use about 100 times more input than output. That is assuming we are using smart editing, so we're not just sending the whole thing. But stats-wise, we can see that this is arguably the second or third smartest model out there, which is not what I had on my bingo card for a Flash model. Although losing an RKGI, visual reasoning puzzles, to GPT 5.2, and that's kind of interesting that these models are not the same thing. But compared to the previous model, Gemini 2.5 Flash, it is a considerable improvement. And in fact, seemingly it's just better than the Gemini 3 Pro. Otherwise, it's largely neck and neck with the other boys. Although they are getting to the top already, so 90%. 100% is interesting for GPT 5.2, right? For AIM 2025 math. But eventually, this is what you're gonna start seeing, that these LLMs just max out the test, so it becomes irrelevant. But perhaps a more notable score is the Live Code Bench Pro. So Gemini 3 is 2,439, and Gemini Flash is close behind, although GPT 5.2 is considerably more powerful, I suppose. But they're damn close, and we can see that Claude Sonnet 4.5, even them, they're just 1,400. And we can see apparently it is number one in the Toolathon, Long Horizon Real World Software Tasks. Okay, but a more interesting one is the Vending Bench 2. So this is agentic long-term coherence. So basically how viable the AI is for actually doing something on its own. And we can see that Gemini 3 Pro is the winner, and followed by GPT 5.2. But the third place kind of like tied, well, I guess it goes to Claude Sonnet. So it's kind of like Claude Sonnet level, I guess, maybe. Not really, because we can see humanity's last exam, it is just destroying it. But Claude Sonnet is okay in coding. And apparently it's an extremely good value model. Although, in this case, they are assuming a 5.1 input-output tokens ratio, which, depending on the use case, could be extremely valid. And ultimately, they kind of have similar ratios, these models. So this is not going to be the deciding factor. But if we just visit artificial analysis here, we can see that Gemini 3 Pro is the best, although it is also 4 times more expensive, right? GPT 5.2, fair enough. And I'm very surprised that Gemini 3 Flash is better than even Opus. Opus, the model that costs how much money? Apparently it has an input of 5, while Gemini Flash is 10 times cheaper. More than 10 times if you consider the output token price too. And if you consider the coding index, it is really hard to argue for anything else unless you are considering intelligence at any cost, right? Even though you have to consider that Flash is also going to be faster. So according to this, you're going to have like 220 tokens per second. That's a good question. Whether that's going to be nicer to work with, I don't think it matters that much once it gets over like 50 or something, but maybe like 100 could be nice, but it doesn't matter that much. The only model that we can somewhat argue is competing with it is DeepSeek 3.2, although it is significantly dumber, but price-wise it's about half. So you might be able to argue for that, or you might argue for GPT OSS 120B, which is 10 times less. But in the league, Gemini Free Flash actually is in. It is multiple times cheaper. So I guess the cheapest one in this league would be GPT 5.1. I guess GPT 5.2 costs the same money too. Yeah. And everything else is more expensive than them. And we can here see too that it is actually taking second place in humanity's last exam. Ella Marina also seems to confirm this. So we are third here with Gemini Free Flash, although GPT 5.2 is not updated, so it should be between them. And also you have to keep in mind that they might not have the same use cases. So we actually see that on WebDev, Cloud Opus is first place. Of course, you probably don't want to pay for that. So I think the least bad way to use Cloud Opus now is to have the anti-gravity subscription, and then you can use Cloud Opus, right? Otherwise, it's kind of hard to justify. But even then, it is pretty close, right? So in most cases, we can argue that Gemini Free Pro is what you would use to progress if you get stuck, but if you just went with Gemini Free all the way, Gemini Free Flash all the way, that probably would work. In fact, it might be even more efficient, considering that you get double the token speed. And also, much like Gemini Free Pro, it is also available in the Google AI Studio. So, say hi. Okay, I'll just see how fast it is. Boom. Hi. Let's go. Another interesting stat to keep in mind. So essentially, one way to think about this model would be that it's a little dumber Gemini Free Pro for like quarter of the price. And also twice the speed, if that matters. But I would say in most contexts, it really doesn't matter unless it's too low. But one interesting stat here is that it has the same omniscience index as Gemini Free Pro. That's very interesting. So this is not one-to-one intelligence, and apparently it's not even hurt, but it is still close. So this would be the feeling where you talk to the AI, and the AI just keep gaslighting you. So one model that would be famous for this is the GPT-OSS 120B. So this is the model that's kind of cheap, right? So this would be 0.05 in and 0.2 out, something like that. But this guy likes to hallucinate a lot. And it is somewhat correlated with intelligence, but not quite. Because we can see that the Gemini 2.5 Flash, that is dumber than the GPT-OSS 120B, actually hallucinated less, but still quite a lot. And in case you didn't have experience, you don't have experience with the new Gemini Free Pro and Cloud Opus, I use them quite a bit lately. And of course, the difference is only somewhat marginal compared to other models, but AI just straight up making up stuff is not something that I've seen, really. At least not remotely as much. Certainly AI can get things wrong, but just completely make things up, not as much. And if you look at it price-wise, just look at all the things, and I think in the area where we see Gemini Free Pro, although they are kind of close, you can argue that GPT 5.2 is a better deal, right? This is a 1.25 in, right? Instead of Gemini Free Pro, which would be 2 and 12 out. So in that category, you can argue that if you want the top 2, maybe, if they're the top 2, although Gemini Free Flash is very close to that. But arguably, these are the top 2 right now. But still, my point would be that there's more of a competition for that. But in the position Gemini Free Flash is taking, there is basically no competition here, right? Unless you start considering the significantly dumber models here than DeepSeek 3.2 and Grok 4.1. So I guess you have some options here. And I'm not saying that these are bad options, but that's pretty much like another category here. So Gemini Free is just taking the crown. Unless you're looking for something that's barely smarter for multiple times the price, or intelligence doesn't matter as much, in which case you might go with DeepSeek 3.2 or GPT-OSS 120B. And I must emphasize that this really matters, because they are making something that most guys completely fail to do. They made a commercially compelling product. In fact, it's so compelling that unless you're looking for a cheap one or the best ones, then it is the choice you are gonna go with, and not much else is gonna make sense. So I would say, as the field stands, you would either choose Gemini 3 Pro or GPT 5.2 for your top guy if you need this. Although if you have access to Cloud Opus, you might use that too, but probably you don't want to directly pay for it. So it would need to be part of some kind of subscription that gives you access to it. But yeah, you don't want to directly pay for it. Then you would use Gemini Fresh basically all the time for all the use cases that cannot be covered by GPT-OSS 120p, most likely. And that's the whole field. So basically, Gemini 3 Pro for rare cases, then Gemini 3 Flash, and maybe GPT-OSS if you need something cheap. In fact, that would be my business critique toward Google, that they keep releasing these awesome models, but they don't have a low end. So we can see that Gemini 3 Pro and Gemini 3 Flash, these make sense for arguably many use cases, most use cases for most people, but they don't really have a cheap option that makes sense, right? Right? You can use maybe like Gemini 2 Flashlight, but that's just not a good value. It is reasonably cheap, no doubt, but others give you far more for less. So that is it. The new Gemini 3 Flash is ridiculous, only beaten by 3 other flagships, including their own.